They did not come for conquest. They came because someone dared to call for help. And when the stars went silent, they answered louder than anyone expected, with fire, with unity, with hope. This is not the story of a war. This is the story of what followed after we stopped dying quietly. The sky above Altaris 4 burned red with the fires of war. Once beautiful resonant core buildings lay broken across the landscape. The air smelled of smoke and fear. Ambassador. Kayla Thorne stood at the shattered window of the command center, her blue skin pale with exhaustion. She had not slept for 36 eclipsed ticks. Administrator Vonnevoice called from behind her the latest reports from the eastern sector. Lyra turned to see Commander Riven Solas, his uniform torn and dirty. Like all Serathi, he stood tall and slender, with shimmering blue skin, but his eyes had lost their glow. He handed her a small data tablet, his hand shaking slightly. How bad, Lyra asked, though she already knew the answer. The shields are failing. The Zarketh forces have broken through our last major defense line. Eli's voice was flat. We have perhaps 2 rotations before they reached the capital. Lyra looked at the tablet and felt her heart sink. The numbers told a clear story. Over 70% of their military forces were gone. Their food supplies would last another week at most. The refugee centers were overflowing with scared civilians. And our evacuation ships, she asked. We can save perhaps 5% of our population. Eli looked away. We must decide who goes and who stays. Lyra closed her eyes. The Serathi had been a peaceful people. They had built their society on science, art, and philosophy. They had no enemies until the Dracorians arrived 4 dusk cycles ago. The reptilian invaders had come without warning, demanding their world and its resources. When the Serathi refused to surrender, the Dracorians began their attack. Call the council, Lyra said, after a long moment. We need to... A young officer burst into the room, her eyes wide. Administrator Commander, the sensors are picking up multiple ships entering our system. Eli's shoulders slumped. More Zarketh reinforcements. No, sir, the officer said. These are different. They're not matching any known Zarketh ship patterns. Lyra and Eli rushed to the main command screen. The display showed 12 ships moving into the Altera system. They were sleek vessels painted white and blue, with strange markings on their hulls. Have they sent any signals? Lyra asked. No, Administrator, but they're moving into defensive positions around our planet. They're placing themselves between us and the Zarketh fleet. The communications officer called out suddenly. We're receiving a transmission from the largest ship. The screen flickered, and a face appeared. It was unlike any species the Serathi had ever seen. The being had light brown skin, dark hair cut short, and no scales or resonant core growths. Its face was flat, with a protruding nose, and small ears on the sides of its head. This is Captain Dax Renner of the UES-TSV, Horizon Terran. Vanguard Fleet, the being said in a deep, clear voice. We received your distress signal. Hold position, help has arrived. The command center fell silent. No one spoke or moved. Are you real? Lyra finally asked. Her voice trembled, the being captain. Winters smiled slightly. Very real, Administrator Vaughn. We've been exploring this sector for the past 6 months. We picked up fragments of your distress calls and came to investigate. But why? Eli asked. You don't know us. This isn't your fight. Another figure stepped into view beside. Captain Winters. This one appeared female with dark hair pulled back tightly and sharp eyes. I'm Strategic Commander. Tactical Director. Ellen Voss, she said, and we make it our business to help those who cannot help themselves. The Dracorians have left a trail of destroyed worlds behind them. We've seen enough to know they must be stopped. Lyra felt something she had not felt in months. A tiny spark of hope. The Dracorians will attack your ships when they realize you're helping us. We're counting on it, Captain Winters said. We'd like to invite you aboard our ship to discuss strategy if you're willing. 2 grav pulses later, Lyra and Eli stood in the docking bay of their last functional shuttle. The journey to the Terran ship would take only flare ticks. Behind them, 5 Cairney guards shifted nervously. This could be a trap, one of the guards said quietly. If they wanted to harm us, they could have simply let the Dracorians finish their work. Lyra replied, We have nothing to lose. The shuttle launched smoothly. Through the viewports, Lyra could see the Terran ships, positioned in a careful formation around Altaris 4. They were smaller than Zarketh vessels, but looked faster and more agile. As they approached the largest ship, the TSV Horizon, Lyra gasped. The vessel was beautiful with smooth lines and glowing blue engines. It was clearly built for both speed and power. The shuttle docked with a gentle thud. Lyra took a deep breath and led her small group through the airlock. On the other side, 3 Terrans waited. She recognized Captain Winters and Commander Nguyen from the transmission. The third was a broad-shouldered male with dark skin and watchful eyes. Welcome aboard the TSV. Horizon, Captain Winters said, placing his right hand over his chest in what must have been a greeting. This is Colonel Thorne, Kale Commander of our Marine Forces. Thank you for your welcome, Lyra said, copying the gesture. I am Administrator Lyra, and this is Commander Riven Solas. Please follow us to the conference room, Commander Nguyen said. We have much to discuss and little time. The Terrans led them through wide corridors filled with more Terrans going about their duties. Some stopped to stare at the Serathi visitors, but most simply nodded respectfully and continued their work. The conference room was large, with a round table at its center. A view screen on one wall showed the positions of all ships in the system. The Zarketh fleet, over 30 vessels, was regrouping on the far side of the planet. They've noticed us, Colonel Rivera said, pointing to the screen. They're adjusting their formation. Captain Winters gestured for everyone to sit. Let me be direct. Ambassador Kayla Thorne. We've studied the Dracorians for several months now. They've destroyed or enslaved 12 civilizations that we know of. We believe they can be stopped, but we need to understand what you're facing here. Eli leaned forward. We've been fighting for 4 dusk cycles. Our weapons barely damage their ships. Their ground troops are stronger than ours. We've lost most of our cities and military bases. Commander Nguyen nodded. We've noticed similar patterns elsewhere. The Dracorians rely on brute force and intimidation. They've never faced a species that fights the way Terrans do. And how do Terrans fight? Lyra asked. Colonel Rivera smiled, but there was no humor in it. Adaptively, creatively, and with absolute determination before anyone could respond, a Terran officer rushed into the room. Captain, the Zarketh command ship is hailing us. Captain Winters stood. Put it through. The view screen changed to show a massive reptilian face. The Zarketh scales were dark green, and its yellow eyes narrowed at the sight of the Serathi leaders. I am War Commander, Overlord Dregor of the Zarketh Dominion. The creature hissed. You will remove your vessels from this system immediately. The Serathi world is claimed by the Dominion. Captain Winters stepped forward. I am Captain Dax Renner of the Terran Vanguard Fleet. We have established diplomatic relations with the sovereign Serathi people. Any further aggression against them will be considered an act of war against Terra and its allies. The Dracorian's mouth opened in what might have been laughter. You threaten the Dominion. You know nothing of our power, Terran. And you know nothing of ours, Commander Nguyen said calmly. Overlord Dragor's eyes narrowed. You have one grav pulse to leave the system, or we will destroy your ships. The screen went black. Captain Winters turned to Lyra and Eli. It appears we're out of time for lengthy discussions. Are you willing to fight alongside us? Lyra looked at Eli, who nodded firmly. She turned back to the Terrans. We have little left to offer, but what we have is yours. Good, Colonel Rivera said, because I brought 12,000 Marines who are very eager to meet these Dracorians. For the first time in many months, Lyra felt her spirit lift. Perhaps not all hope was lost after all. The grav pulse passed quickly. On the bridge of the TSV horizon, Captain Winters stood with his hands clasped behind his back. Beside him, Commander Nguyen studied the tactical display. Her face calmed despite the tension in the air. The Dracorians are moving their ships into attack formation, a young officer reported. As expected, Winters said. He pressed a button on his chair. All ships' battle stations deploy fighters and prepare defense systems. Administrator Vaughn watched with wide eyes as the bridge transformed. The calm, ordered space became a hive of focused activity. Terrans moved with purpose, calling out reports and status updates. You've done this before, she said quietly to Commander Nguyen. Many times, Nguyen replied without looking up from her display. Humanity had its own wars before we reached the stars. We learned hard lessons about survival. Colonel Rivera entered the bridge, now wearing a black armored suit, with a helmet tucked under his arm. Marine dropships are ready. Ground teams are standing by. Captain Winters nodded. Begin the first phase. On the main screen, small craft launched from the Terran ships. They moved with incredible speed, darting toward the approaching Zarketh. Fleet. What are those? Commander Kent asked. Fighter craft, Rivera explained. Each piloted by a single Terran, fast, agile, and heavily armed. The fighters reached the Zarketh ships and began flying complex patterns around them. The larger Zarketh vessels fired energy weapons, but the Terran craft were too quick, dodging the blasts with ease. They're just flying around them, Lyra said, confused. They're not attacking. Commander Nguyen smiled slightly. They're scanning and mapping, learning the Zarketh's weapon systems, response times, and blind spots. Terran pilots are very good at this. After several flare ticks, the fighters pulled back. Captain Winters received a data transmission and nodded with satisfaction. Begin Phase 2, he ordered. 3 of the Terran ships moved forward, positioning themselves directly in front of the Zarketh fleet. The reptilian invaders fired immediately, bright beams of energy striking the Terran vessels. Your ships, Kent cried out. They'll be destroyed. But the Terran ships didn't explode or break apart. Instead, they were surrounded by shimmering blue fields that absorbed the energy attacks. Adaptive shield technology, Captain Winters explained. The more they hit us, the better our shields learn to resist their specific weapons. The Terran ships now returned fire. Their weapons were different from the Dracorians. Instead of energy beams, they fired what looked like small projectiles that moved at incredible speeds. Kinetic penetrators, Rivera said. Noting the Serathi leaders' confused looks. Simple, but effective. No shield can fully stop physical objects moving at that velocity. On the screen, Several Zarketh ships showed damage where the projectiles had struck. The reptilian fleet began to spread out, changing their formation. "They're adapting," Commander Nguyen observed. "Good. Now they'll take our decoys seriously." "Decoys?" Lyra asked. Her question was answered as hundreds of small objects launched from the Terran ships. On the tactical display, they appeared identical to the Terran fighters from earlier. The Zarketh fleet split its fire, trying to target both the decoys and the real threats. "Now," Captain Dax Renner said. "Colonel, you may begin your operation." Rivera pressed a hand to his ear. "All drop ships, you are cleared for launch. May God have mercy on the Dracorians, because we won't." From underneath the Terran ships, larger vessels detached. They were blocky and utilitarian, clearly designed for one purpose: delivering soldiers to the ground. "What are you doing?" Commander Kent asked. "Taking back your planet," Rivera replied. Starting with your capital city, the dropships accelerated toward Altaris 4, bypassing the distracted Zarketh fleet. On the tactical display, they split into 3 groups, each heading toward a different location. "We've identified 3 key Zarketh ground bases," Commander Nguyen explained. "If we can capture or destroy them, their ground forces will be disorganized." Lyra stepped forward. "Our people, our civilians, many are still in those areas. No," Captain Winter said gently. "That's why we're sending in our best. Marines trained in urban combat and civilian extraction." "I don't understand," Commander Kent said. "Why would you risk your people for ours?" Colonel Rivera's expression hardened. "Because we've been where you are. Humanity nearly destroyed itself before we learned to work together. We promised ourselves that if we ever found other intelligent life, we would do better than those who came before us." The bridge fell silent. Then a communication officer called out, "Colonel, we have a live feed from Alpha Team." The main screen changed to show the view from a helmet camera. A Terran soldier was moving through a ruined street in what had once been a beautiful Karani city. Ahead, a group of reptilian soldiers had cornered several Karani civilians. "Permission to engage," a female voice said over the feed. "Granted," Rivera replied. "Save those civilians." "Lieutenant Delgado." What happened next amazed the Karani leaders. The camera moved with blinding speed as the soldier charged forward. 2 more Terrans appeared from different directions, their weapons fired with sharp, controlled bursts. The Zarketh soldiers fell before they could react. One Zarketh, larger than the others, managed to raise its weapon. The camera jerked as Lieutenant Delgado actually leaped over a fallen wall and struck the Zarketh with such force that it crashed to the ground. "Area secure," Delgado reported. The camera turned to show the Karani civilians huddled and frightened. "We have 12 civilians, 3 injured but stable, requesting medical evacuation. Already on the way," another Terran voice responded. The screen returned to the space battle. The situation had changed dramatically. 3 Zarketh ships were heavily damaged, drifting without power. The others had pulled back into a defensive formation. "They're regrouping," Commander Nguyen said. "They didn't expect this level of resistance." Captain Winters nodded. "Good. That gives us time to secure the ground positions." He turned to Lyra and Kent. "We need to know more about your planet's defenses, what's left of them. If we can integrate our systems with yours, we can create a more effective shield." "Can help with that," Kent said with new energy in his voice. "Our resonant core technology is different from yours, but it might be compatible." "Excellent. Our science officer is waiting for you in Lab 3. "Captain." Dax Renners gestured and a young Terran stepped forward to escort. "Commander Kent." "And me?" Lyra asked. "How can I help your people need hope?" Winter said simply. "They need to know they're not alone anymore. Would you be willing to broadcast a message with me? To tell them that Terra stands with Altaris?" Lyra felt tears in her eyes. Yes, I would be honored." As they prepared, the broadcast reports continued to come in from the surface. More Terran dropships had landed. Marine teams were engaging Zarketh forces across the planet. Most importantly, they were evacuating civilians from danger zones and establishing safe areas. One report made everyone on the bridge stop and listen. A Marine sergeant named Sergeant Mira Talon had found a group of Karani children hidden in a school basement. They had been there for rotations without food. The sergeant's team had not only rescued them, but had stayed to defend the position when Zarketh forces counterattacked. "This is why we fight," Colonel Rivera said quietly. "This is what humanity does best. We protect." As Lyra prepared to address her people, she looked at the Terrans around her. These strange, determined beings who had come from nowhere to fight for strangers. For the first time since the war began, she allowed herself to feel something beyond survival. She allowed herself to hope. The news spread quickly across Altaris, for Terrans had come. They were fighting the Dracorians. They were winning. In the broken streets of what was once the beautiful city of Seranthal, Lieutenant Sarah Navis led her squad through the ruins. Her powered armor whirred softly as she moved, enhancing her strength and speed while providing protection. The helmet display showed her team's positions and identified any life forms nearby. "Movement ahead," whispered Corporal Greg Patel through the comm system. "Large heat signature, probably Zarketh." "Hold position," Maria ordered. She crept forward alone, her rifle ready. Around the corner she saw a Zarketh officer shouting at 3 soldiers. Between them stood a Serathi male, his blue skin bruised and his simple clothes torn. The Dracorians were pushing him, laughing. As he stumbled, Maria's translator picked up their words. "Tell us where the others are hiding, or we'll feed you to the hatchlings." She had seen enough. All units prepared to engage. Non-lethal for the prisoner, full force on the Dracorians. Her team acknowledged with clicks in her earpiece. Maria took a small device from her belt and rolled it toward the Dracorians. It made a soft beeping sound. The reptilian soldiers turned toward the noise. The device exploded in a flash of blinding light. Maria moved first, leaping from cover as the Dracorians clutched at their eyes. Her rifle fired 3 precise shots, dropping 2 soldiers instantly. Corporal Patel and Private Leah Jones appeared from different positions, taking down the 3rd soldier and targeting the officer's legs. The officer fell roaring in pain and anger. Maria approached carefully, keeping her rifle aimed at his head. "In the name of the unified Terran Accord, you are now a prisoner of war," she said, her translator converting her words to the Zarketh language. "You will be treated according to galactic conventions." The officer spat on the ground. "Terrans have no honor. You fight like vermin, hiding and striking from shadows." Maria knelt beside the Serathi prisoner. "Are you hurt badly?" she asked gently. The Serathi looked at her with wide, surprised eyes. You saved me." "That's why we're here," Maria said, helping him stand. "I'm Lieutenant Delgado." "What's your name, Jorith?" he replied. "I was a teacher before the invasion." Maria nodded too. "Private Jones. Get him to the medical station." She turned back to Jorith. "Were there others with you?" "Yes. Many of us are hiding in the old Lumen caves north of the city. Children, elders, anyone who couldn't fight. The Dracorians were trying to make me tell them where." Maria helped Jorith to a small vehicle where Jones waited. "We'll get them out. You have my word." As Jorith was taken to safety, Maria contacted Captain Winters on the TSV Horizon. "Sir, we've located a large group of Serathi civilians hiding in Lumen Caves north of Kirill, requesting additional teams for evacuation." "Understood, Lieutenant." Winters replied, "Colonel Rivera is redirecting Beta and Charlie teams to your location. Be advised our sensors show increased Zarketh activity in your sector. They know something's happening." "Roger that," Maria said. She turned to her team. "Let's move. We need to reach those mines before the Dracorians do." Meanwhile, on the TSV Horizon Science, Officer Alan Patrick worked with Commander Kent in a large laboratory. They were surrounded by Serathi resonant core technology salvaged from damaged defense systems. "Fascinating," Alan said, examining a blue resonant core under a scanner. "These crystals naturally amplify energy. Is that how your shields worked?" Kent nodded. "Yes, the crystals formed an energy network around our cities, but the Dracorians found the resonant frequency that disrupted them." Alan typed rapidly on his console. "What if we change the modulation pattern, random frequencies, instead of fixed ones?" Kent's eyes widened. "That might work, but we'd need an enormous power source. That we have," Alan said with a smile. "Terran fusion reactors packed quite a punch." On the bridge, Ambassador Kayla Thorne watched the tactical display with Captain Winters and Commander Engwin. The situation in space had reached a stalemate. The Zarketh fleet had pulled back to a defensive position, unwilling to engage the Terran ships directly again. "They're waiting for reinforcements," Nguyen said. "According to our intelligence, they've called for help from their main fleet." "How long do we have?" Lyra asked. 3 rotations, maybe 4. Winters replied. "Not long enough to evacuate the planet. Then we fight," Lyra said with new determination. "My people are not warriors, but we can learn." Winters studied her face. "Administrator, with all respect, this is not your war anymore. It's ours, too." Lyra straightened her back. "Captain, this is still our home. We must defend it together." Winters nodded with approval. "Commander Nguyen contact Colonel Rivera. Tell him to begin training any Serathi who wish to fight." Back on the surface, Maria's team had reached the entrance to the Lumen Caves. 2 Zarketh patrol vehicles lay destroyed nearby. Evidence that other Terran Marines had been there first. Inside the mines, Maria found Sergeant Mira Talon and her squad setting up defenses. The wide cavern was filled with hundreds of Serathi civilians, many looking thin and scared. "Sergeant," Mira Talon reported, "we've secured the area and begun evacuation of the most vulnerable. Medical teams are treating the sick and injured." Maria looked around at the frightened Serathi. "These people need more than just rescue. They need hope." She removed her helmet, wanting them to see her face. She stepped forward and raised her voice. "People of Altaris, I am Lieutenant Sarah Navis of the Unified Terran Accord. We are here to help you. The Dracorians are being pushed back. Your world will be free again." An elderly Serathi stepped forward. "Why would Terrans fight for us? What do you want in return?" Maria smiled gently. "Nothing. Where I come from, we believe that all sentient beings have the right to live in peace and freedom." A small Serathi child approached Maria, looking up with large, curious eyes. "Are you really from another world? Why do you look so different?" Maria knelt down to the child's level. "Yes, I'm from a planet called Terra. We look different because we grew up under a different sun on a different world, but inside, we're not so different. We all want to live to learn to be safe. Can you teach us to fight like you?" A young Serathi male asked. "I want to defend my home." Sergeant Baker stepped forward. "We can teach you. Not everyone needs to be a warrior, but everyone deserves the chance to defend what they love." Over the next several grav pulses, as evacuation ships arrived to take the most vulnerable to safety, Maria and her team began showing the willing Sarathi basic combat techniques. They were not natural fighters, but they learned quickly. On the third rotation after the Terrans arrived, the Dracorians launched a major counterattack. They had gathered their remaining ground forces for an assault on the capital city, hoping to take back control before their fleet reinforcements arrived. Colonel Rivera coordinated the defense from a forward command post. Terran Marines fought alongside newly trained Sarathi fighters. The battle was fierce, with the Dracorians pushing forward with wave after wave of soldiers. "They're trying to overwhelm us with numbers," Rivera said too. Captain Winters over the comm. "We're holding, but it's getting tight." On the dauntless Winters turned to Science Officer Patrick. "How soon can the shield be ready?" "We need another 6 grav pulses," Patrick replied. "Commander Kent and I are reconfiguring the resonant core network now." "You have 3 grav pulses," Winters said firmly. "After that, there won't be much left to shield." As the battle raged on the ground, Lieutenant Sarah Navis found herself fighting alongside Jarek Velin, the teacher she had rescued rotations earlier. He moved awkwardly with the Terran weapon she had given him, but his eyes showed fierce determination. "Stay behind, cover," Maria shouted as Zarketh energy blasts flew overhead. "Only fire when you have a clear shot." Jarek Velin nodded, then pointed suddenly. "Lieutenant, look." Maria turned to see a massive Zarketh Walker vehicle stomping toward their position, crushing buildings in its path. Its weapons could devastate their entire defensive line. "All units focus fire on that walker," she commanded, but their weapons barely scratched its armored hide. The walker continued forward, unstoppable. Maria grabbed her last plasma charge. "Cover me, before." Jarek Velin could protest. Maria ran toward the walker, dodging energy blasts and leaping over debris. Using her armor's enhanced strength, she jumped higher than any Terran could naturally, landing on the walker's leg. She climbed quickly, reaching the main body. The Zarketh pilot spotted her and tried to shake her off. Maria held tight, placing the plasma charge on what looked like an engine housing. She set the timer for 30 seconds and pushed off, falling back to the ground. Her armor absorbed most of the impact, but she still felt pain shoot through her leg. Jarek Velin ran to her side, helping her back to cover, just as the plasma charge detonated. The walker shuddered, then collapsed in a heap of twisted metal and smoke. A cheer went up from the Karani fighters. Maria smiled through her pain. For the first time since the invasion began, the Dracorians were in retreat. News of the Zarketh retreat spread quickly through what remained of the Karani resistance. For the first time in 4 dusk cycles, they had won a major battle. Hope began to grow. In the main science facility of the capital city, Science Officer Alan Patrick and Commander Kent worked frantically to finish the new shield system. They had connected Terran power generators to the remaining Karani resonant core network. Sweat dripped from Alan's forehead as he calibrated the final connections. "The power flow is stable," Kent said, watching the readings on his display, "but the coverage will only extend about 50 miles from the center of the city." "It's a start," Alan replied. "Once we prove the concept works, we can expand it." He tapped his communicator. "Captain Winters, the shield is ready for testing on they." The TSV Horizon. Captain Winters acknowledged the report. "Excellent timing. Our sensors show the Zarketh fleet is making another push." Commander Nguyen pointed to the tactical display. They're trying to break through to land reinforcements. They know they're losing the ground war. Activate the shield, Winters ordered. Back in the science facility, Alan pressed a series of controls. The large resonant core in the center of the room began to glow with blue-white light. The energy spread outward through connected smaller crystals, forming a network that extended throughout the city. Outside, a shimmering dome of energy appeared, growing larger until it covered the capital and surrounding areas. The effect was beautiful, like being inside a giant soap bubble that reflected rainbow colors. "Shield is stable," Alan reported. "Power consumption is within acceptable limits." Kent stared at the readings with amazement. "This is incredible. The energy efficiency is far beyond our original designs." "Terran power systems paired with Sarathi resonant core technology," Alan said with a smile. "Seems we make a good team." The shield was activated just in time. The Zarketh fleet launched a massive bombardment targeting the capital city with everything they had. Energy weapons and explosive projectiles struck the shield and were absorbed or deflected. In the city streets, Sarathi civilians watched, in awe, as the attacks that had devastated their world for 4 dusk cycles now fizzled harmlessly against the new shield. Colonel Rivera stood with Administrator Vaughn in the central plaza, observing the light show above them. "The shield is holding," he said, "but the Dracorians won't give up easily." No Lyra agreed. "They will try something else." She looked around at her people, many now wearing pieces of Terran armor or carrying Terran weapons. "But we are no longer helpless, thanks to you." Rivera shook his head. "Not just us, your people, have courage. They just needed the tools and training to use it." A Terran soldier approached them quickly. "Colonel, we're receiving transmissions from other systems. 3 alien ships have just entered orbit." Rivera tensed. "Zarketh reinforcements." "No, sir. They're identifying themselves as the Volturi, the Arne Collective, and the Shangxi Federation. They're requesting to speak with the Terran leadership." Lyra gasped. "These are other species that have suffered Zarketh attacks. They've never responded to our calls for help before." Rivera and Lyra hurried to the command center where Captain Winters was already speaking with the alien representatives via holographic projection. 3 very different beings appeared before them. A Volturi admiral, a tall being with gray skin who breathed through special apparatus, an Arne representative insect-like with compound eyes and multiple limbs, and a Shangxi diplomat whose crystalline body glowed with inner light. "We have observed your battle with the Dracorians," the Volturi admiral was saying. "No species has ever successfully resisted them for this long. The Terrans fight differently." The Arne representative noted mandibles clicking. "You do not follow expected patterns of warfare." The Shangxi diplomat's body pulsed with light as they spoke. "We have come to offer our assistance. If Terrans will lead, others will follow." Captain Winters glanced at Commander Nguyen, who gave a small nod. "We welcome your help," Winters said. "But I'm curious. Why now?" "The Sarathi have been fighting alone for 4 dusk cycles." The Volturi admiral's breathing apparatus hissed before he answered. "Fear. The Dracorians have conquered many worlds. No single species could stand against them. But Terrans have changed the equation," the Arne added. "You have shown that the Dracorians can be defeated. We do not seek to rule," Winter said clearly. "We seek to free. If you join us, it will be as equals in an alliance." The 3 representatives conferred briefly. Then the Shangxi diplomat spoke for all. "We accept these terms. Our ships will follow your tactical lead." After the transmission ended, Lyre turned to Winters. You just formed an alliance that spans multiple star systems in flare ticks. Terrans are good at bringing people together, Winters replied with a small smile, especially when there's a common enemy. The newly formed alliance wasted no time. The Volturi ships, with their advanced stealth technology, positioned themselves behind the Zarketh fleet. The Arne contributed their expertise in electronic warfare, disrupting Zarketh communications. The Shangxi, whose crystalline technology was similar to the Kirani's, but more advanced, helped strengthen the planetary shields. Lieutenant Delgado, her leg now healed, led a mixed team of Terran Marines and Sarathi fighters on a mission to capture a Zarketh command center. With them was Jorath, the teacher who had become a capable fighter. Remember the plan Maria told the team as they approached the Zarketh facility? We need their communication codes intact. No explosives, unless absolutely necessary. Jorath moved beside her now, comfortable with his Terran weapon. The building has 3 levels. The command center will be on the lowest floor. Maria nodded. Good. We go in quiet, take out the guards, and secure the command center before they can destroy the data. The team moved silently through the night. Terran Marines used their advanced armor to take the lead, while Sarathi fighters provided support. They reached the facility without being detected. The first level had minimal security, just 2 Zarketh guards who were quickly subdued with stun weapons. The second level proved more challenging with a squad of Zarketh soldiers on patrol. Maria signaled her team to hold position, then deployed a small drone that released a gas designed specifically for Zarketh physiology. Within moments, the reptilian soldiers slumped to the floor unconscious, but alive. Clear, Maria whispered. Move to the lower level. They found the command center behind heavy doors. 4 Zarketh officers were inside working at various stations. They looked up in shock as the doors opened to reveal Terrans and Sarathi with weapons aimed at them. Surrender, Maria said through her translator. You are now prisoners of the Terra-Sarathi Alliance. The lead Zarketh, a scarred veteran with dark green scales, snarled defiantly. He reached for a control panel. Yarek Velen fired first, a perfect shot that stunned the Zarketh before he could touch the controls. The other officers, seeing their leader fall, raised their hands in surrender. Well done, Maria said it to Yarek Velen with genuine admiration. You've become quite the soldier. I'm still a teacher, Yarek Velen replied. I've just learned new subjects to teach. With the command center secured, Terran technicians began downloading the Zarketh communication codes and tactical data. This information would prove invaluable for the Alliance. Back at the capital, Science Officer Allen and Commander Kent made a breakthrough. By studying the captured Zarketh technology, they discovered a way to disrupt the propulsion systems of the Zarketh fleet. It's a quantum disruption field, Allen explained to Captain Winters and Admiral Vaughn. It interferes with their engine cores, essentially shutting them down temporarily. Can it work on their entire fleet? Winters asked. Allen hesitated. Yes, but there's a catch. We need enormous power, more than all our ships combined can generate. What about the planet's core? Kent suggested. Altaris has a unique resonant core metal core that produces incredible energy. If we could tap into it. That's never been attempted at this scale, Lyra said. It could be dangerous. Allen nodded. Very dangerous, but it might be our only chance when their reinforcements arrive. Captain Winters looked at the tactical display showing the approaching Zarketh armada. 50 ships, strong less than a rotation away. Begin the preparations, he ordered. We need to be ready when they arrive. As the Alliance forces prepared for the final battle, Maria and Joroth stood on a hill overlooking the capital city. The shield dome glowed softly above them, and ships from 4 different species moved in coordinated patterns around the planet. "I never thought I would see this," Joroth said quietly. "Different worlds working together." Maria watched a group of Sarathi children playing nearby, no longer hiding in fear. "This is what we fight for," she said, "not just to defeat the Dracorians, but to build something better afterward." Joroth turned to her, his expression serious. "If we survive tomorrow, what happens next? Will Terrans stay?" Maria looked up at the stars. "I don't know. But whatever happens, your world will never be alone. Again." The rotation of the final battle arrived, the skies above. Virilon Prime, darkened as the Zarketh reinforcement fleet emerged from hyperspace. 50 warships arranged in attack formation. They dwarfed the combined Alliance fleet, which consisted of 12 Terran vessels and 9 ships from the other species. On the bridge of the TSV Horizon, Captain Winters studied the tactical display with Commander Nguyen. Their faces were calm, but tension filled the air. "All ships report ready," a young officer announced. "The Vulturian Arn vessels are in position. The Shangxi are maintaining the orbital shield grid. And the quantum disruption device," Winters asked. Science Officer Allen's voice came through the comm system. "Final calibrations complete. Captain, Commander Kent and I are ready to activate on your order." Winters nodded. "All ships maintain defensive positions. Protect the planet at all costs. The Dracorians must not break through." The Zarketh command ship transmitted a message. "War." Commander Overlord Dragor's reptilian face appeared. On the main screen, his yellow eyes narrowed with contempt. "Terrans," he hissed. "You have interfered where you do not belong. The Dominion has claimed this world. Surrender now, and some of you may be allowed to live as slaves." Captain Winters stood tall. "We reject your offer, War Commander. The Karani world is under our protection, as are all members of our alliance. It is you who should consider surrender." Overlord Dragor laughed, a harsh sound like grinding stones. "You are outnumbered and outgunned. Your alliance is nothing but the desperate union of weak species. The Dominion cannot be defeated. We shall see." Winters replied calmly, and ended the transmission. 3. Zarketh fleet began its advance. Their weapons charged, preparing to unleash destruction on the Alliance ships and the planet below. "All ships execute defense pattern," Delta Commander Nguyen ordered. The Alliance vessels moved into position, creating layers of defense before the planet. On the surface, in the central power facility, Allen and Kent worked at their stations. They had connected their quantum disruption device to the planet's resonant core through a network of amplifiers. Energy readings climbed higher as the core's power flowed into their device. "Power at 70%, Kent reported. Core temperature rising, but still within safe parameters. 80%, Allen said moments later. 90. We're almost there. Administrator Vaughn stood with them, watching as the fate of her world hung in the balance. "Will this work?" she asked quietly. "It has to," Allen replied, his eyes fixed on the controls. Outside the capital city, Lieutenant Delgado and Colonel Rivera led the ground forces. Terran Marines stood alongside Sarathi fighters, ready to repel any Zarketh troops that might break through. Jarek Velin commanded a unit of Sarathi who had once been teachers, artists, and scientists, now transformed into determined warriors. "Look!" someone shouted, pointing at the sky. Above them, the space battle had begun. The Zarketh ships fired their first volley energy beams, streaking toward the Alliance fleet. The Terran vessels took the brunt of the attack, their advanced shields flaring blue as they absorbed the impacts. The Alliance ships returned fire. Terran kinetic weapons, Volturi energy disruptors, and Arne swarm missiles struck the Zarketh vessels. Some found their mark, causing damage, but most were stopped by the Zarketh's heavy armor. "They're too strong," Kent said, watching the battle on their monitors. "Our ships can't hold out much longer." "Just a few more moments," Alan urged. "Power at 98%, 99%. A massive explosion rocked the facility. Dracorians had managed to target their position with orbital strikes. The shields held, but the building shook violently. "They know what we're doing," Kent said. "They're trying to stop us." 100%. Alan shouted over the noise. "We're ready." Administrator Vaughn stepped forward. "This is my world. I should be the one to activate it." Alan nodded and moved aside. Vaughn placed her hand on the resonant core control panel. "For Altaris," she said, and pressed down. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a pulse of blue-white energy erupted from the facility, spreading outward in concentric rings. It passed through the shield, through the atmosphere, and into space. On the TSV horizon, Captain Winters watched as the energy wave reached the Zarketh fleet. One by one, their ships lost power. Engines died, weapon systems failed, and they began to drift. "It worked," Commander Nguyen exclaimed. 70% of the Zarketh fleet is disabled. All ships Winters ordered attacked the remaining vessels. Boarding teams prepared to capture the command ship. The Alliance fleet surged forward. Without most of their fleet to support them, the remaining Zarketh ships were quickly overwhelmed. The Terran vessels moved with precision, targeting engines and weapon systems to disable rather than destroy when possible. A specially equipped assault shuttle launched from the TSV horizon carrying Captain Winters, Colonel Rivera, and a team of elite Marines. They docked with the Zarketh command ship, cutting through the hull and boarding by force. The fighting inside was fierce, but brief. The Terran Marines, in their powered armor, moved through the Zarketh vessel with unstoppable momentum. They reached the bridge in flare ticks. War. Commander Overlord Dragor stood waiting for them, surrounded by his elite guards. His scales were dark with rage, but his eyes showed something new, fear. "You cannot defeat a Dominion with a single battle," he hissed as the Terrans surrounded him. "We're not here to defeat your Dominion, Captain." Winters replied, removing his helmet. "We're here to change it." Administrator Vaughn entered behind them, her head held high. "The terms of surrender are simple. Your forces will withdraw from Serathi space. You will pay reparations for the damage caused, and you will sign a non-aggression pact with all members of our alliance, Overlord." Dragor snarled. "The High Command will never agree to such terms." Colonel Rivera activated a communication screen showing the defeated Zarketh fleet, drifting powerless in space. "Your choice is simple, War Commander. Evolution or extinction." After the surrender was signed, the rebuilding began. The Alliance grew stronger as word spread of the Zarketh's defeat. Other species, long intimidated by the Dominion, reached out to join the new Galactic Cooperative. 5 years later, Virilon Prime had been transformed. The crystal cities stood again more beautiful than before. Between the spires, new buildings showed the influence of Terran Volturi Arn and Shangxi architecture, a blend of cultures working together. Jorath, once a teacher and then a soldier, now served as the head of a new academy, where young Serathi learned both their own history and the ways of other worlds. Lieutenant Sarah Navis, who had chosen to stay on Altaris, often visited to teach classes on Terran culture and history. In the main plaza of the capital city stood a memorial statues of Terran soldiers and Serathi civilians side by side with words carved in multiple languages. Just as all hope was lost, they came, and everything changed. Administrator Vaughn now. Ambassador Vaughn prepared for her first journey to Terra. As her ship readied for departure, she stood with Captain Winters, who had become a dear friend. "Your world has healed well," Winters said, looking out at the thriving city. "Thanks to Terra," Vaughn replied. "Without you, there would be nothing left to heal." Winters shook his head. "We only showed you the way. Your people did the hard work of rebuilding." Vaughn smiled. "That is why humanity has become so important to the galaxy. You don't conquer. You don't control, you inspire. You show others how to be stronger, not by dominating them, but by standing with them." As her ship rose into the clear blue sky of Altaris, Vaughn thought about the speech she would give to the United Terra Council. She would tell them how a single act of courage had transformed not just her world, but an entire sector of the galaxy. How Terrans, by simply being Terran, stubborn, compassionate, innovative, and brave, had changed everything. The stars would indeed remember humanity's name, not as conquerors, but as the ones who showed the way forward, as the ones who came when all hope was lost, and by doing so, changed everything.